As a young man fresh out of Yale, James Lane Buckley first served his country in the Navy during World War II.
He's had an enormous impact on the conservative movement in so many different ways.
Jim Buckley is conservatives' man for all seasons. Jim Buckley is one of the very few Americans to serve in very, very high positions in all three branches of the government. But beyond that, what Jim Buckley has done is he's changed not just the United States, but he's changed the world.
His first foray into politics came in 1965 when he was talked into managing his brother's campaign for mayor of New York City. James was called upon to be a candidate himself just a few years later, challenging the liberal Republican U.S. Senator from New York. He thought the idea ridiculous, but agreed to run after being assured there was no chance whatever of winning. That might have been the end of James Buckley's political career, but these were turbulent times. Egged on by academia and the political class, protests and riots, lawlessness and violence rocked college campuses and American cities. Sound familiar? As American flags burned across the country, James Buckley felt called to defend America's ideals, challenging a liberal Republican for one of New York's seats in the United States Senate.
Why are most policemen backing Jim Buckley?
I believe we've got to do more to protect all our citizens from the criminals among us. This means stamping out the drug traffic. This means tough diplomacy abroad and tough law enforcement at home.
Isn't it about time we had a senator? Buckley.
This time, building a coalition against the violent anti-Americanism sweeping the nation, he won.
To win a statewide election in New York as a self-avowed conservative, wow, that's spectacular.
A fearless conservative, Buckley would spend his years in the Senate defending the sanctity of life, supporting the firm traditional values that made America strong. He was victorious in a campaign finance case that he took all the way to the Supreme Court. In doing so, he transformed political campaigns for generations. Like his younger brother Bill, James Buckley always made time for young people, safeguarding the future of conservatism, no matter how busy his schedule.
There is an awareness among younger people of the extent to which government as such is getting too large and is smothering lives.
James Buckley would also prove one of those rare men, willing to put principles above political advancement. Understanding how Watergate and impeachment could tear the country apart, Senator Buckley took a stand as the first major conservative to call for Richard Nixon's resignation in 1974.
The character of a regime always reflects and expresses the character of its leaders. The captain is responsible for his ship, the commander for his army, and Mr. Nixon has explicitly recognized this responsibility.
Even more damaging to his political prospects, Buckley fought against a federal bailout of New York City, which was sinking under overspending and mismanagement. That might also sound familiar. Upholding his values may have cost him re-election. History wasn't done with James Buckley.
We're faced with an unprecedented situation in this country today.
From the legislative branch, he moved to the executive branch, appointed by President Ronald Reagan as Undersecretary of State in charge of military aid to countries battling the Soviet Union. As the president of Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty, Buckley propagated the message of freedom and democracy to nations enslaved by communism.
What he did at Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, helped bring down the Iron Curtain.
With proud, principled service in 2 of the 3 branches of government, Buckley tackled the 3rd when he was appointed U.S. Court of Appeals judge for the District of Columbia Circuit, serving with distinction until 1996, and mentoring 2 future Supreme Court justices, Justice Clarence Thomas and Justice John Roberts.
I did have the privilege of seeing him work firsthand as a judge on the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals when I was a law clerk, and I was deeply impressed with his work ethic and his personality and demeanor. He was enormously humble and self-effacing, a great and thorough writer, and he had a great knack for wit and humor during oral arguments.
Even after departing the bench, James Buckley worked tirelessly to advance the causes of American freedom and prosperity, authoring influential books, including Freedom at Risk, published in 2010, and Saving Congress from Itself in 2014.
Jim's defense of federalism, of tailoring the role of the government so that it works for everybody, not just for people at the top, but not just for people at the bottom either, but for the whole of the American people.
Through his writings, Buckley resolutely and persuasively defends the foundational ideas of American federalism.
This is notable and important because respecting and enforcing federalism and other structural limits on government power contained in our Constitution are the best way to preserve the dignity and worth of every human person. And James Buckley understood that very, very well.
Tough diplomacy abroad and tough law enforcement at home. I pledge to devote my efforts to this cause. Total integrated programs. I plan to work for such programs in Washington.
James Buckley has spent a long, remarkable life as an exemplar of conservative values, defending America's ideals of freedom and justice from enemies within and without.
The rule of law matters for all of us. Hey, government is not the master of the people, government's the servant of the people. And Jim has always reminded us of that.
For his lifetime of service, advocacy for federalism, and defense of American exceptionalism, the 2020 William F. Buckley Jr. Prize for Leadership in Political Thought goes to James Lane Buckley.